Hello and welcome to Storytelling. By now, it was around 2 in the morning, and everything was fairly dark save for a few dim lights in the hallways. In my 10 by 10 cell, all I could see were shadows and silhouettes of what little was visible. I knew I should have been sleeping, but instead I was lost in thought, my arms folded behind my head. My thoughts had a nasty habit of returning to things I made a concerted effort to put behind me but was unable to. I began counting as soon as I heard footsteps: 7, 8, 9, 10. He then turned to face me. Like everyone else around here, his face was expressionless and hard. He had no desire to make friends, he was just going about his business, performing his nightly rounds. It didn't matter that I wasn't even sure if he noticed me staring back at him. I was inside, and he was outside. I stopped counting when he walked past my cell. Nothing to it. It would be 92 minutes before he returned. Gazing at the ceiling, I once more began making plans for what I would do once I left this place. After 5 days and a wake-up, I would be leaving those doors behind for good. I estimated that I would have completed roughly 7 months of my 1-year sentence. My work was waiting for me, but I knew that after I left, that would likely be the only thing that remained the same. After paying legal fees, my elder brother was taking care of my house, fixing my car, and managing the little money I had left over from savings. Was my anger still present? I was still feeling a lot of things, and anger wasn't even close to describing them. However, these feelings remained hidden until after I left this location. I had at last understood why men who serve 10 or 20 years are released empty vessels. When you check in, all human remains are left at the door. All that matters is survival, and this place pales in comparison to the facility located up north, which houses the most ardent inmates. With the hope of hitting the snooze button once more, I closed my eyes and attempted to drift off to sleep for the countless time. My old bedroom with the room darkening shades was something I yearned for. Like everything else in my life, I knew that room would never be the same. The last I spoke with my brother Gary over the phone in the prison visitor center, he told me, "I'll be picking you up next Tuesday." Hopefully for the last time, we glanced at one another through the plexiglass wall that separated us. "Anything you want to eat your first night out?" "A steak, a big steak, medium rare." Gary smiled at my suggestion. "You're too easy, Steve." I assumed you would say something that would make it more difficult for me to pass it off to my wife. "Until you're able to settle down again, you'll be staying with Andy and me. I am aware that your home is nearly empty of both food and furniture. This will enable you to acquire the necessary time. You can come and go as you please, and although it won't be the Ritz-Carlton, at least it will be clean." He grinned. I didn't. I started to say, "I want to thank you," but he interrupted me. "Ignore it. That's what family does for each other. That's why we're family. And don't worry about your parents. I'm confident that after everything settles down, they'll change." However, we both understood that wouldn't happen for a long time, if at all. Both sides had intense feelings for one another. "You see my kids lately?" "The last time I was at Mom and Dad's was roughly 2 weekends ago. Heather appears largely unchanged, but John has adopted the ridiculous bowl-shaped haircut that seems to be in style right now." I told him so. "That little prick told me something, you know? Claimed he didn't have to listen to me and that I wasn't his father. Had I not had Mom present, I would have slapped the living daylights out of him. With that one, you're going to have your hands full." I was aware that John would not have dared to say such a thing in front of me. I was his dad, but when I got out, he was not going to live with me. For a while at least, he and his sister would stay with their mother. I had time, so whatever. Hell, once I was out of the hole, I had all the time in the world. I would bide my time until the ideal time. I wasn't in a rush. Half the house was still mine, even though the divorce was final. If Kathy were to buy me out, I would probably be out of pocket about $65,000. I was aware that she had most likely broken into our bank and taken all of our CDS and bonds by now. Fortunately, I had provided a list of everything, broken down by serial number, to my attorney, so there would be no doubt as to who owned what. I was essentially handed my guts on a silver platter by Kathy and my ex-buddy Bob once I was freed, which would come sooner rather than later. However, that was back then. The first time, I had been caught off guard and unprepared. I would make sure that didn't occur again during my lifetime. I was thus waiting, thinking back, and anticipating the better days I would have once I was free of this horrible place. Then and only then could I put my personal life back together and begin a new chapter, ending the previous one. At least, that was my hope. Until then, I hoped I could keep it all together. I had a great few days before going to jail because I had no idea what was going to happen. A few of my so-called friends would approach me weeks before I was even sentenced to prison, telling me they knew something was wrong but had chosen not to speak about it. Who the devil was thinking this, anyway? Did they assume that I was aware of it and approved of it? They all had to know that I would never have tolerated it, but I guess they didn't want to get entangled in other people's woes. The majority of people had had enough. I believed that our marriage was wonderful. 12 years and still going strong. We had a good house, 2 children, and careers we were both proud of. Yes, there were the occasional small arguments. Whose marriage wasn't without its challenges? But despite my unwavering love for her, I had no idea of her true potential. We mostly hung out with a few couples from the neighborhood rather than having a large number of friends. Most of them were about our age and had been married for more than 7 years. All of us, except Bob and his wife Connie, had 2 or more children. They had been trying for a child forever, but their efforts had yielded no results. I was trying not to get involved in their personal affairs, or anyone else's for that matter, but I suppose Kathy knew the true reason why. I didn't want to be that close to her, but we were close. Eventually, the quantity of alcohol Connie began to drink was something that was obvious to everyone in our group. The alcohol flowed more at our parties than if you were driving home because nobody had to drive home. Each of us could practically crawl home if necessary because we all lived close to one another. Her drinking began approximately a year ago, and it got worse over time. Connie was simply more depressed at first, but after a few months it started to look a little ugly, then a lot ugly. Bob had his hands full taking care of his wife, so he didn't drink much. "Bob, honey, get me another drink, will you?" It would begin in the early hours of the night. By night's end, she was ordering him to get her a damn drink and to get his worthless bum over there. He had to practically carry her home several times because she was so inebriated. Though I felt bad for him, it was his issue, not mine. As I undressed and prepared for bed, I remarked, "Connie was in rare form tonight." I believe she fainted multiple times. I assume that Connie began undressing and asked Greg to assist her, which is the main reason Greg and Judy left early. Nobody was going to allow her to enter that pool in any way. My wife said, I felt sorrier for Bob, and then threw her top and shorts onto the chair by our bed. While I understand Connie's sadness at not being able to conceive, I think it's inappropriate for her to vent her frustration on her husband. I suggested to her that she could adopt, but she was not listening. She said they wouldn't be in this pickle if her husband was more of a man. I told my wife, well, they'll either work it out or get divorced. I'm sure Bob won't put up with it for very long. You are aware that next week, we are all planning to go out to dinner. Though I'm not counting on it, I sincerely hope that she is acting appropriately. My wife said I was kind of wishing we weren't going. This week, I'll speak with her. Perhaps she will give it a rest for a night. She was attempting to project optimism. I can only hope so, I uttered. Connie didn't calm down, though. Hold on. Waiter, please. Everybody who came past our table was yelled at by Connie. Her words were slurred as she asked, "How's a girl supposed to get a drink in this place, anyway?" That was when she made her second move against Bob. When I attempted to defuse the situation, he was on the verge of blowing up. "Come on, Connie, you promised me a dance tonight, remember?" I stated. I placed her drink down on the table and dragged her out onto the dance floor in the lounge. She began to say no, but I didn't take no for an answer and got up right away. She was the reason we were on the verge of being evicted, and I was trying everything I could to at least try to do something. For 3 songs, I took her around the dance floor. My wife was speaking to Bob, who appeared to be even less than human. As we danced close to the hall, Connie excused herself, stating she needed to use the restroom. I guided her to the door of the ladies' room and helped her through. 5 minutes went by and she still hadn't emerged, so I debated what the hell I should do next. I asked the 2 women entering to see if they could see how Connie was doing. "It wasn't good," a woman said, glancing out the door. "Do you mean the woman in a bright yellow dress?" She shook her head when I nodded yes. "She's unconscious in one of the restrooms. I'll be on watch while you go get her if you'd like." I went in, gave her a quick wash by the sink, and sprayed her face with cold water. For a brief while, it was helpful, but her legs gave way once more. In the end, I had to practically carry her to our table. "Please allow me to assist you in loading Connie into your car, Bob," I said, standing at the table and holding up a very inebriated and dazed Connie. "She's out cold, and I don't think she's going to be waking up anytime soon." Bob was too embarrassed and angry to hide it. "I'll handle this from here, Steve. Resuming your seat, I'll take care of it. Although it's not the first time, this one will undoubtedly be the last." I carried her out against his protests, and he went to get Connie's purse and bid farewell to everyone. I gave Bob a backslap and placed Connie on the back seat. "I apologize, dude. What more could be said? I appreciate your assistance tonight. I've reached my breaking point and have no idea what to do next. Both of you ought to visit a therapist. You can both bet that you are unable to solve this problem on your own. Please feel free to contact Kathy and me if you require any moral support at all. All right, we'll assist you in any manner we can." Even though I was merely paying lip service, it sounded good. We were unable to improve their circumstances, and in all honesty, their issues were most likely too advanced for anyone to handle at this time. I gave them, at most, a few months. I was not entirely wrong, but nobody ever anticipated how things would turn out. 3 weeks later, at just after 10:30 on a Thursday night, we heard the sirens and went out the front door to figure out what the hell was going on. At the end of our block, I noticed a plethora of bright lights. Everybody in the neighborhood appeared to be sprinting down the street in the direction of the disturbance. "Stay here, Kathy," I yelled. "I will investigate the matter." Along with everyone else on the block, I ran towards the scene. It was not attractive. The neighborhood was all agog as the fire department forced open Bob's car's driver's door. "What's happening? Is Bob okay?" I inquired. Someone said, "It's not Bob, it's Connie." They were fighting at the time. Taking Bob's keys, she bolted out the door and climbed into the car. She put the car in gear and sped down the street despite his attempts to stop her. She obviously didn't go very far. Source went on to describe the uncomfortable circumstances. Connie, traveling at a speed of over 40 miles per hour, rear-ended a parked car on the street. The ambulance arrived just as I was ready to inquire about her condition. In less than 30 seconds, they had her on a stretcher, piled her into the back, and left. At the last moment, I saw Bob climb in the back with her. The performance had ended. Inside the house, all the lights were still on and their front door was ajar. It appeared that Bob and Connie had engaged in a very heated altercation. Everything was strewn across the floor. Using Bob's phone, I called Kathy and told her what had occurred. I left him a note saying I had his house keys on the front door and shut up his place. My wife asked me when I was finally home, "How's Connie?" "Not very good." She swerved just before crashing into the back of someone's car because she wasn't using a seat belt. She didn't hit the steering wheel because the airbag deflated, but she did hit the driver's side window hard enough to break it. About 35 miles per hour, according to the police, was her speed. We'll just have to wait because Bob went to the hospital with her. "Don't you think we should go down there?" "Honey, he's going to have his hands full tonight. We'll go down there tomorrow when everything settles down." Right now, we need to get to bed. Tomorrow's going to come a lot faster than we'd like. We kissed goodnight but didn't sleep much, both of us having Connie on our minds. At about 11 o'clock the next morning, my cell phone rang. "Steve, Connie's on life support," yelled my wife over her cell phone. "I'm leaving work right now. Bob's a mess, and someone needs to be there with him. Meet me there when you can," she said frantically before hanging up. Damn, the guy couldn't catch a break to save his soul. On the way to the hospital, I picked up lunch for the three of us at a nearby McDonald's. I called Kathy's parents to pick up the kids from our house after school. I quietly walked down the hall into the waiting room where my wife and three others were consoling Bob. "How's she doing?" I asked. "Not good," my wife whispered. "The doctor pulled Bob into his office a while ago. He came out looking like a zombie and hasn't said more than 3 words since." "Bob," I said, sitting down next to him, "you okay?" It was a stupid thing to say, I know, but what the hell, I needed an opening line. "Steve, she's not going to get any better. The doctor said there is little, if any, brain activity. I don't know what I'm going to do." He started to cry into his hands. I motioned for everyone to back off and leave us alone. "Has anyone notified Connie's parents?" "They're on their way over and should be here any minute." "Steve, the hospital staff is asking me if Connie has a living will and if she carried a donor card. I'm starting to feel like they're vultures circling around my wife. The doctor had the gall to ask me if she were brain dead, would I consider pulling the plug? For Christ's sake, they're talking about my wife, not a piece of meat." He was shouting now, not caring who heard him. "Why can't they just fix her? These goddamn doctors, why can't they just fix her?" I didn't have an answer for him. Connie's parents arrived a few minutes later, and the three of them went into her room. There was a lot of loud crying and cursing. I think her father was somehow trying to blame Bob for his daughter's condition. The attending physician went in, and about 20 minutes later, everyone came out. Her parents left heartbroken, knowing they'd never have the chance to talk to their daughter again. We left the hospital at around 8 o'clock and swung by Kathy's parents' house to get the kids. God, I hope I never have to make that choice, I kept thinking to myself. 48 hours later, with Bob, Connie's parents, and the doctor in the room, they shut off the machine that was keeping her alive. She went quietly and peacefully. We tried to console Bob any way we could. Even though Connie had been hell on wheels for the last year and a half, Bob really loved her. At times like this, you usually remember the good stuff, not the hard times. The funeral was packed, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Even the men wept openly. Bob took it hard, finally taking a month leave of absence from work and visiting his family back east. I told him that we'd take care of his place until he got back and not to worry about anything. "I love you, you know that, don't you?" I said to my wife while getting ready for bed. It had been an exhausting couple of weeks, and things were starting to get back to normal. If I'm ever like Connie, just pull the damn plug. There is no way I'd want to be hooked up to a machine like that forever. "Steve, don't even talk like that. It was a stupid mistake on her part. It could never happen to us." Bob came back a couple of weeks later, somewhat functional. He asked Kathy to help him go through Connie's clothes and get rid of everything. I helped him take out his bedroom set when he bought a new one. It seemed after 3 months, he was coming to grips with it all. Everyone bent over backwards to make sure he remained involved and included in all the social functions. 2 of our neighbors even fixed him up with a few blind dates, but they didn't go anywhere. It was way too soon. So life went on, or so I thought. When Bob got that spark back in his eye about 6 months later, I was happy for him. And when I saw him smile and start to enjoy himself at our get-togethers again, I was relieved he was out of that damn depression he'd been in for so long. He was intermingling with everyone. We finally had our old Bob back. Looking back, I should probably have seen it, and maybe I did, but it never quite registered. Kathy and I were still a happy couple, only there was something not quite right. I just couldn't put my finger on it. We were close as always and made love about as frequently as we had before all this with Connie and Bob had gone down. But I don't know, maybe it was just my imagination. Nonetheless, after a few months, I ended up asking Kathy outright if there was something bothering her. Nothing really, Steve. Why do you ask? I don't know, you just seem to be a little out of sorts and distant lately, I responded, trying not to be confrontational. Everything's fine, she told me, smiling. Maybe you haven't been getting enough sex. If you want more, all you have to do is ask. Sex, I thought to myself. She'd never referred to it as sex, she had always said lovemaking. And why should I have to ask? Stupid me. I just smiled, gave her a peck on the lips, and shut my brain down. I'll never forget Friday, August 20th. It was the day my world came crashing down around me. Kathy called me at work to tell me our kids would be spending the weekend with her folks and asked what time I'd be home. Honey, in that case, I'll make sure I'm home a little early. You want me to pick up anything special on my way? That won't be necessary. I just need to know what time you're going to be home, that's all. All right. A million things started running through my brain. Looking at my watch, I noticed it was 3:30, an hour and a half before I could leave. I adjusted the hard-on in my pants, thinking about all the fun we would be having this weekend. I kept backing off on the accelerator driving home, not wanting to start off my great weekend with a speeding ticket. I did, however, set a new record by making it home in just under 28 minutes. I should have suspected something was up when I saw two cars in my driveway, but I didn't, since I recognized one as our friend Bob's new car. Hey honey, I'm home, I called out, walking in from the garage. Bob and Kathy were standing in the kitchen. Hey Bob, I greeted him. What's going on? Steve, I need to talk to you about something. Why don't you have a seat? Kathy was nervous. Her voice quivered, and she kept wringing her hands. Something was wrong. I'll just stand here, I told my wife, looking at both of them. Steve, I wanted to tell you myself before you get the papers. I was confused. Kathy, what papers? She took a step backward. Divorce papers, she could barely choke out the words. My heart skipped a beat. Kathy, what are you talking about? What divorce papers? I don't understand. Steve, Bob started to say before I put my hand up to stop him. Bob, stay the hell out of this. This is between me and my wife. Then it hit me. I looked at her, then at him, and then back at her. Bob, I think you should leave right now. My hands were starting to form into fists. Bob, stay, my wife told him. Steve, this also concerns him. Bob, you have 10 seconds to leave this house, and if you don't, you may be leaving in a goddamn body bag. He turned toward the door. Kathy, you and I need to talk right now, I shouted at her. Steve, there's nothing to talk about. I'm in love with Bob. Steve, I'm so sorry. How long have you been banging our good buddy Bob? Was it even before he drove Connie over the edge and killed her? Bob had stopped making his retreat and looked at me, fire in his eyes now. Steve, you don't know. Oh, I think I do. All the while I was trying to console you, you sneak behind my back and do my wife. I ought to rip your head off, you piece of, well, you're not going to get away with it, you hear me? The two of them were now standing together, panic-stricken while I ranted and raved. If you think I'm going to just roll over and let you both walk all over me, you've got another thing coming. Both of you, get out of my house. I was screaming at them. Steve, it's my house too, Kathy replied, recovering from her fright. Not anymore. Number 304's allowed, and you certainly fall into that category now, don't you? It was all I could do not to kill the two of them. I'll be out of your hair as soon as I get my things. No way. You will leave right this second if you know what's good for you. Kathy, let's just leave, Bob said, motioning her over to the door. Listen to your new toy, I said, trying to goad Bob into doing something. "Steve, I'll be back for my stuff when you cool down." "You'll be dead and buried by that time," I admonished with as much bitterness as I could muster. They both backed out the kitchen door, all the while never taking their eyes off me. After that, I went nuts. At least 2 beers and a whole lot of damage were what happened next, followed by dishes, our microwave, and 4 walls being either partially or totally destroyed. Not bad for 2 hours worth of work. It took me for trips, but I finally got everything out of Kathy's bedroom closet. I dumped it all on the front lawn and set the sprinkler timer to run for the next 4 hours. I shut the doors, locked them, and put the safety chains on. Over the next 45 minutes, I heard a lot of screaming and yelling. It only lasted through beer number 6, then all got quiet. I'm a lightweight drinker, and 6 beers put me off until the following morning, which was probably a good thing. Going out to get the morning newspaper, I saw Kathy had taken all her belongings. At least I won't have to drag them to the curb, I thought, trying to smile about what I'd done, but it wasn't helping. I was devastated, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I probably should have called my brother and parents to tell them what was happening, but I didn't. I wasn't sure whom Kathy had told, though I was pretty sure most everyone didn't know just yet. However, after last night, I suspected that most of our neighbors now knew something was up. This morning, I really didn't care. When I called over to Kathy's parents' house and tried to talk to my kids, her mom wouldn't let me speak to them. "Steve, Kathy picked them up last night." "Fran, last night Kathy was too busy picking her clothes up off our front lawn." "Let me talk to my kids," I roared over the phone. She hung up on me. I called back, but she never picked up. "Old hag," I said under my breath. I still wasn't thinking straight, but I knew enough to cut my losses by canceling all our credit cards. I told the companies they had been stolen and to cancel them immediately. I went to an ATM and got out all the cash the bank allowed from our savings and checking accounts. I figured on Monday I would be there when the bank's doors opened. With a couple of cups of coffee and a few pieces of toast in me, I planned out my day, change the code on the garage door opener, get new locks for all the doors, and pull out anything of value and bring it over to my brother's house. I was about to start when the front doorbell rang. I almost opened the door but then stopped with my hand on the knob. I looked through the peephole and saw someone on the other side with a large manila envelope. He stayed there for another couple of minutes before leaving. He was going to catch me eventually, just not today. I gave my brother Gary and his wife Andy the high, or should I say low, points from last night. I told him to keep the bag of stuff under wraps and not to say anything to anyone about it. He said he was sorry, and I agreed with him that Kathy had turned into a sorry piece of meat. After that, I headed out to Home Depot. With 3 new lock sets in hand, I started for home. I figured it would take 2 hours at the most to install the new locks. I was still coming down my street when I saw Bob's car in the driveway. He was standing just outside the driver's door looking at Kathy, who was loading up the back seat of his car. I probably should have driven on by and waited until they were done, but I was way too pissed off for that. Instead of driving by, I sped up with tires squealing. I turned into my driveway and plowed into the back of Bob's car. Bob had just enough time to jump into his car as mine made contact. The initial impact drove his car right up against the closed garage door. I put my car into reverse, backed up about 15 feet, and floored it again. This time, I drove his car through the garage door. I could barely see with all the steam coming up from under the hood of my car. My car's engine was making a terrible racket, but when I put it into reverse again, it complied. I only backed up about 10 feet this time, and although I put my foot to the floor, my car could push Bob's car just a few feet before, much to my dismay, it stalled out. My heart was pumping at capacity when I flew out of my car and let my adrenaline take over my brain. I grabbed my son's aluminum bat from inside the garage door and started swinging for the fences while Bob huddled on the floor of the front seat of his car. I took out both the windows on the driver's side and finished destroying what was left of the windshield. I was about to open his door when I heard loud voices behind me. "Drop the bat and put your hands on your head," an authoritative voice ordered me. I dropped the bat and turned around. 2 police officers were standing right outside the garage, guns drawn. "Drop the bat, put your hands on your head, and kneel down now." Since they weren't going to take no for an answer, I surrendered my bat and did as they ordered. I was pushed forward onto the garage floor, handcuffed, and put in the back of the patrol car. Only then did Bob pull his sorry bum out of his car. He was more than a little shaken and looked as scared as anyone I'd ever seen. I wanted to stick my head out the window and tell him I wouldn't miss the next time, but I never got the chance. My witch of a wife was crying, talking to the police, and looking at me. I smiled back at her. I was taken downtown, booked, and given one call. I called my brother Gary. Since it was the weekend, I had to spend 2 nights in jail before I could be brought to court Monday morning. My appearance before the judge lasted only about 3 minutes. I pleaded not guilty, and he set my bail. It was late afternoon before Gary could make bail and get me out of jail. "Steve, they're talking about attempted murder or at least assault with a deadly weapon." "I know. I heard it at my initial hearing before I pleaded not guilty. First things first, I need you to take me to the bank immediately. She's probably cleaned out the accounts, but I need to see if she hasn't. All the cash was gone from our savings and checking accounts, but not the CDS and bonds in our lockbox. However, there was already a court order in place preventing me from removing any of them. You could have at least left me $5 in our bank account." "You really are cheap, you know that?" I told her when she answered her cell phone. I needed that money for me and the kids to live on until the rest is taken off hold. "What's the matter? Doesn't Bob make enough money for you all to live on?" "I've got a house payment to make, maybe I should just make a little fire in the living room, you know, just to take the chill off." "Steve, quit talking crazy. I'm sorry about all of this, but you're making it harder than it has to be. Why can't you just accept it and move on?" "I'll move on as soon as you send my kids back home." "Steve, I can't do that, especially in your current frame of mind. I don't think you would ever harm them, but I can't take that chance. After this is all over, I'll let you see them as much as you want. You don't have to worry about the kids, but I can't say the same about you or your buddy Bob. I'm hanging up now, and this is the last time I'm going to be talking to you. From now on, you'll have to go through my attorney. Steve, I'm just sorry it all happened the way it did. Kathy, you have no idea how sorry you and Bob are eventually going to be." She hung up on me. When my court date came up on the calendar a few weeks later, my attorney pleaded temporary insanity on my part. He said that after Kathy told me about her and Bob, I totally lost it. My actions weren't premeditated, but more of an impulse thing. Kathy and Bob both said I had threatened them previously, and even though there was a restraining order against me, they said they still feared for their lives. With good reason, Mr. Moore, the judge said after looking at Kathy and Bob's statement. "Did you tell Mr. Kelly that if he didn't leave your house, he'd be leaving in a body bag?" "I don't remember my exact words, Your Honor. It may have been something to that effect, but how would you feel if a friend of yours was banging your wife behind your back?" He wasn't moved by my argument. My lawyer quietly berated me. "Steve, say nothing, do you understand? From now on, you don't remember a thing you said or did. Is that understood? I'm trying to convince them you didn't know what you were doing. You telling the judge it was something like that isn't helping your case." He was right. Chris, my boss and main character witness, backed me to the hilt. He testified that I was a model employee and that he had never heard me utter a curse word, much less lose my temper. After Chris's testimony, the case was closed. I only had to await the decision of the judge. He said he would hand down his ruling in the next few days. When I returned to work the next day, my boss told me that he knew a couple of thugs who could make them both disappear if I so desired. "Thanks for the offer, but this is my problem, and I'm going to handle it in my own way," I told him. On my way home from work, I wondered to myself what they might have charged to do the job. 6 months and $112,000 later, I ended up getting screwed by both my now ex-wife and the system. The divorce went through, and she was awarded 50% of everything. The house was to be sold along with everything else of value. She had told the court all her jewelry had come up missing and accused me of taking it. I explained that all mine was gone too, adding that she must have taken it all the day of the incident. At least I did not have to make good on that count. The system put in the final screw, a year in jail. Are they nuts? I screamed at my attorney after hearing the judge read the sentence to me. Steve, it could have been worse. You could have killed him, and then you would have been convicted of manslaughter. Look, with good behavior, you'll be out in less than 8 months. And if you stay clean, it goes off your record in 2 years, instead of having a felony conviction on your record for the rest of your life. To the time, get out and move on with your life. That was easy for him to say. He wasn't the one who was going to be spending 24 hours a day in jail. I appealed the ruling, but after 3 months got nowhere. In less than a year, my life had gone from being something great to nothing. I had Kathy and Bob to thank for that. Steve, your job will be waiting for you when you get out. Don't do anything stupid in there and watch your back. Those were Chris's only 2 suggestions, but they were good ones. After meeting with my children for the last time on Sunday, I turned myself into the court. I was put in the county facility and started my incarceration. I had checked out everything on the internet prior to getting there and thought I knew all the ins and outs, but looking online and actually being there were 2 entirely different animals. I did have my brother put money into my inmate account so I could at least buy things, but I found that most stuff was junk food and things I had no use for. So, with no cell phone or computer, I wrote my thoughts down on a pad of paper. Once every other week, I made my collect calls to my brother, my mom, and my kids. I wanted to keep up with what was going on in the real world. Steve, my brother informed me during one visit, I'll make sure to have your car repaired before you get out. I know a guy that will do it for what the insurance will pay if he can do it when he has downtime. I will, though, make sure he has it done before you're out. I also have someone taking care of your lawn, and I noticed that you hadn't installed the new deadbolts, so I had them put in. I told Kathy if she wanted in, she'd have to give me 24 hours as notice. The last time she was there, she took the rest of her and the kids' clothes. She wanted to take their beds, but I told her I would need to see a court order for her to remove any furniture from the house. She got a little testy with me, but dropped the issue. I was glad my brother was looking out for my interests. Kathy allowed my parents to see my children every other Sunday afternoon. She was getting bitchy every time, saying she was doing it as a courtesy because, as she put it, they were no longer part of her family. It seems Kathy was bad-mouthing not only me but also my entire family. This is according to what my mom could get from the kids. Kathy started calling me their jailbird father and told them when I got out, she was going to have words with me on what I was and wasn't allowed to do with them. She was such a witch. However, my parents went along with everything she asked of them. I wanted them to tell her to pound sand up her bum and shut the door in her face, but they wouldn't. They said something about keeping open lines of communication with her. At this point, 7 days in, I contacted my lawyer to confirm my visitation privileges. I would have the children every other weekend and a full month in the summer. The holidays were split down the middle and would flip over every other year. I let my boss know I was getting out. I told him I would need a week to get readjusted and everything set back up in my life. I was never so happy to turn in my orange jumpsuit and put on my street clothes. Gary was waiting outside for me. We stopped at the first bar we found. To freedom, I said, touching our bottles and downing the first of 3 beers. Andy has a meal fit for a king waiting for us when we get home, a steak dinner with all the trimmings, just like you requested. I figure you can spend the first couple of nights with us until you can go through your things at the house. It's still up for sale, but there hasn't been so much as an offer on it. Kathy wanted to drop the price, but she needs your okay for that. I smiled. You've still got all the furniture in the house, but as per your instructions, I trashed the master bedroom set. Dinner was great. I ate more than I had in the last 8 months. Unbuckling my belt and with a glass of wine in my hand, I enjoyed the true taste of having the freedom to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. Not only did I overeat, but I also drank too much. I kind of remember 5 or 6 beers and at least 3 glasses of wine. It was after 10 o'clock the next morning before I awoke, and well after 11 o'clock before I was finally able to sit up and hit the bathroom without falling over. I stumbled down the stairs into the kitchen. The note on the counter said it all. If you're reading this, you survived last night. There is coffee made, and everything else you might want is in the refrigerator. In the spare bathroom, there is soap, a razor, and shaving lotion, a toothbrush, and toothpaste. If there is anything else you need, we'll get it tonight when I get home from work. The keys to your car and house are on the key rack by the back door. I hope I don't have to tell you not to do anything stupid. See you about 5:30. I guess my brother knew me better than I thought. 2 cups of coffee and an English muffin were all I could get down. After a shower and a shave, I almost felt human again. Gary had a fresh change of clothes laid out for me, and within an hour I was on my way over to my house. The outside of the house looked the same. I think I must have sat in my newly repaired car for at least 10 minutes before getting out. Memories, both good and bad, flooded my brain. I saw the new deadbolt lock, and with a twist of the key, I was inside. It was a mess, things thrown all around. It looked like someone had been in a hurry to get in and out of there. Pieces of clothing were strewn along the floor. The kitchen was halfway clean, and the refrigerator still contained the food that had been there months ago. With my back against the sink, I saw the damage to the wall where my fist had tried to go through but found a stud instead. I rubbed my knuckles, remembering what it felt like that night when I walked in and found the 2 of them waiting for me. Which, I said under my breath. Walking upstairs, the kids' closets were empty, but there were a few mementos they had either forgotten or didn't have enough time to take. My bedroom was empty, with the exception of my dresser and my clothes hanging in the closet. I could see the dark spots on the carpet where our bed and her triple dresser had been. This room would have to be gutted and redone before I would set foot in there again. The rest of the house was as I left it. It would need a good cleaning if it were ever to sell, but I was in no hurry whatsoever to have it sold. I had an agenda, and selling the house wasn't a priority at all. I sat down at the kitchen table and started making a list of what needed to be done. I could probably have done most of the repairs myself if I wanted to, but at this point in my life, I just wanted it done. Folding the list, I put it in my pocket and headed for the bank. I wasn't surprised when I looked in the lockbox and found she had cleaned out everything. I needed written proof from the bank that she had taken it all. I was told they had video recordings of the lockbox area if I needed additional proof. A call to my attorney confirmed she had taken everything, but what I didn't know was that he had already filed a motion with the court to get everything back. I guess we'd won the first round since the court had already ordered Kathy to return everything she'd taken from the lockbox to the court. My lawyer caught me up to date on the rest. Steve, she's offering her share of the house for your share of the CDS and bonds. I told her to return everything like the court directed her to do, or I would have her arrested for not complying with a direct court order. She's crazy if she thinks I care that I'm also on her list. My job is to legally represent you and only you by making sure your interests are protected. That's the reason you hire a lawyer, I told myself. Back at my house, I took an inventory of what I still had. I knew a local contractor in the neighborhood and made a note to call him to fix the walls. I next called Merry Maids to come in and do a full cleaning, especially in the kitchen and dining room where I'd flung the microwave and tossed the dishes against the wall. Too bad it hadn't been Kathy's grandmother's good china. No one had turned off the electric, phone, or water, so I figured by the weekend I'd be able to move back in, as soon as I bought a bed, that is. I wasn't looking for a full bedroom set, more so just a queen-sized bed. It had been forever since I had shopped for even a mattress, and there were a million styles and material types, not to mention prices to choose from. You could pay anywhere from $500 on the low end to well over $7,000 on the upper end. I just wanted something to sleep on. I settled for a good box spring, mattress, and frame for just over $900. At least now I wouldn't have to worry about sleeping on a mattress that someone had drilled my ex-wife on. Hank, the contractor, came over on Saturday morning to give me a price on repairing the damage. "Your walls are pretty solid. Must have hurt like hell when you hit that damn stud," he said with a faint smile. "I just want to get the holes fixed and a fresh coat of white paint put on, nothing special," I told him. He made a few notes, looking at the damage I'd done to the 4 walls. "How does $200 sound to you?" "Awfully low." "Well, that's my price. Take it or leave it." "Hank, I've still got money left. I don't want to take advantage of our friendship." Steve, whether you know it or not, you did me and every other guy in this neighborhood a big favor. After your incident with Bob and the car, most of us guys kind of looked up to you. I don't know what I would have done if it had been my wife and me, but she and every wife in the neighborhood now know their husbands would never put up with what your wife did to you. Hell, Randy and Linda got into it hot and heavy one night when she took Kathy's side. Randy told her if she felt that way to take her and leave because he would have probably put her in the damn grave if she'd done that to him. Hank took a deep breath, recomposed himself, and continued, "Let me reiterate. You are our neighborhood hero." It made me smile a little, but he didn't know the half of what it was like to be in my shoes. I thanked him and said that he could start whenever he wanted. With that, all the easy things on my list were done. Within 6 weeks, all the bonds and CDs had been returned to our bank lockbox. The house had been repaired and professionally cleaned. Life was starting to get back to my new normal. When my kids spent their first full weekend with me, we were all a little apprehensive. In other words, no one knew quite what to say. "Kids, I know it's going to be a little strange for a while, but this is still your home. If you have something to say, just say it. I don't want you to feel you can't say or tell me what's on your mind for fear of hurting my feelings. Over the last year, my skin's gotten a lot thicker, and I don't think there is anything you could say that would shock me anymore." I think they were a little relieved I'd been the one to break the ice. "Dad, you know we both love you and we're sorry Mom did this," John said. Heather nodded in agreement. "Dad, we didn't know about Bob until after that week when Mom said we were going to live at his house. We weren't happy, we still aren't happy there. There was nothing either of you could do, it was your mom's choice. Even if Bob was out of the picture, your mom and I would never get back together again. What we had is over and done with, and we're all going to have to deal with it. I just want you to know I'm still your dad, that I love you, and if you ever need anything, I'll be here for you." We all hugged. A pizza and a movie started and finished off the evening. Did I want to belittle and slam their cheating mother? Hell yes. Only I wasn't going to lower myself to her level, not yet, anyway. Our first weekend was a success in my book. We started out on a tentative note but ended up like we always were, which was a family. However, in this new kind of family, we were together yet apart. The one thing I did do was get John a decent haircut, no more bowl cut for him. On the outside, life went on. I went to work, had a small social life with my friends in the neighborhood, and filled up the rest of my time with the kids. When John started soccer and Heather started dance, I became even busier. Everyone except my brother told me to get over it, to move on, start my life over. You're still young. You can find yourself another girl, get married, have a new life. To them, I would just say, F you and the horse you rode in on. I wasted 14 years on that witch, and if I wanted to still be mad, I had every right to be. Talk was cheap. They hadn't gone through what I had over the last 2 years. Sometimes you just need that pound of flesh to make the pain and hurt go away, and that's what I was going to get, one way or another. Kathy wanted to lower the price of the house. I flatly refused. She was totally pissed off. I don't give a damn, Steve. It's never going to sell at that price in this down market. We need to drop it at least $20,000 to move it. If you want to give up $20,000 of your share, I'll agree, But if not, the price stays where it's at. Although I dragged my feet, we eventually divided the bonds and CDS. She spent hers in less than 3 months on a new car and a vacation for her and Bob. Not me. I banked everything. This was going to be the start of my nest egg, of a sort. 8.5 months after I got out of jail, there was a fire at Bob's house. It was reported that while they were at a soccer game, someone doused the inside of the electrical box and the rear of the house with gasoline and started it on fire. By the time the fire was out, the back half of the house was toast. In addition, they had no power. The next day, I had 2 police officers at my front door. A trip to the police station did them no good. "Steve, you were only 1 block away. You could have easily snuck away and done this," accused one of the officers. "Prove it," was my only reply. I let them go on for a little while, but when I'd had enough, I made my move. "If you don't mind, I'm out of here," I said, standing up. "Mr. Moore, we're not done with you yet," the larger of the 2 cops said. I guess they were playing good cop, bad cop. "Either charge me, release me, or I'm calling my lawyer because I'm not saying another word," I told them, taking out my cell phone and looking at them. "We're going to release you, but we will be keeping our eye on you." I smiled on the inside while mentally checking off my things-to-do list. 1 down, 2 to go. I volunteered to take my children because they couldn't live in a house without any power. The repairs to Bob's house were going to take at least 2 months, so the 3 of us had a mini vacation together. "Steve, I know you did it, no matter what the police say," said a suspicious Kathy, picking the kids up one night for dinner. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was with all our good friends, or should I say my good friends. Too bad you and Bob are no longer invited to the get-togethers." "Maybe I could put in a good word for you," I suggested sarcastically, smiling inwardly. "Don't bother. We wouldn't go even if they begged us," she responded, sounding bitter. "Well, I guess you 2 have each other, and that's all that matters. At least for now." "What's that supposed to mean?" Kathy responded, wide-eyed. "Nothing. I just meant that the 2 of you are so lucky to have one another, that's all." I smiled, and not just on the inside this time. The kids wanted to spend more and more time with me, which didn't sit well with either Kathy or Bob. On more than one occasion, I heard about shouting matches between Bob and the kids, with them telling him that he wasn't their father and to stop acting like he was. Kathy tried to intervene but ended up telling me not to keep stirring up trouble between Bob and the children. "Kathy, I don't know what you're talking about. I never badmouth you in front of the kids. You're their mother, and I've told them on more than one occasion that they have to listen and do whatever you ask of them." "How about Bob?" "Well, he's a backstabbing, scum-sucking a-hole whose mother should have smothered him at birth. Besides that, I guess he's a nice enough guy. If looks could kill, I would already have been dead. He's good to your kids, and I don't want you to badmouth him anymore to them." "Not going to happen. He's less than nothing to me, and I only pray I get the chance to piss on his grave one day." With that, she again gave me the look, not that I would do anything to harm him, mind you. "Steve, so help me," she started to say. "What are you going to do, Kathy? Cheat on me? Divorce me? Put me in jail? Make my life hell? Oh, wait, you already did all those things to me, didn't you? I guess you really can't do any more to me, can you? Why don't you go back to that piece of trash you call a husband and leave me alone?" Without another word, she turned tail and walked back to her house. To think I once loved that woman, I said to myself, watching her walk away. Work was going great. It didn't take me more than a couple of weeks to get up to speed once I got back. Chris was pushing me to take over for more accounts. It would take extra time to do this, but without the kids or anyone else at home, what else did I have to do at night? After making initial contact with the customers, I scheduled several 2-day trips to each facility to familiarize myself with their operations. 3 of the accounts were a piece of cake and, in the end, would add only a little bit to my plate. But the 4th one, TWW Incorporated, was an entirely different matter. They were in the middle of changing their manufacturing process, and it was going to take me one trip a month just to keep up with all the changes. The person they initially assigned to me to keep up with the changes left a lot to be desired. He was knowledgeable but highly unorganized. The data I needed, I never got, and when I pushed him for what I wanted, he got a little arrogant with me. "Chris, I don't want to make waves, but if I don't get what we need, I won't be able to make the changes here, and in the end, we screw up their system." After 2 calls, I was given an emissary between the engineer and myself. From that day forward, I met with a woman named Monica, who worked directly with the engineer. "Steve, Monica Bradley," she said, introducing herself and holding out her hand for me to shake. She had a degree in process engineering but had only been with this company for about 5 years. We worked great together. Somehow, she got me everything I needed, either by hook or by crook. When we were about 2 weeks away from finishing Phase 1, I asked her out to dinner for later that evening. "Monica, I'd like to take you and your husband out to dinner tonight as a little thank you for all your help," I told her. "The Hilton where I'm staying has an excellent restaurant, so why don't the 2 of you plan on meeting me there about 6 o'clock? We shook hands, and I was out of the plant by 4:30. For the next hour, I got caught up on paperwork and emails. With 50 emails backed up, I wondered what people did before the internet. At 5 minutes to 6 o'clock, I walked down the stairs and into the restaurant. I was shown to a table and waited for Monica and her husband to arrive. At precisely 6 o'clock, Monica walked into the restaurant all alone. I waved her over to the table and rose to greet her. "Where's your husband?" "Parking the car?" "Steve, I'm not married." "Oh, I'm sorry." "I just assumed," I said, looking down at the rings on her hand while pulling out her chair. "I wear these rings as a way of keeping everything professional on the job. No one is going to take the chance of hitting on a married woman and getting nailed with a sexual harassment lawsuit, so it just makes it that much easier at work. Besides, they seem to move up the married individuals a lot faster than the single ones for some reason. I think the reason for that is because married employees seem to be more stable. How do you get away with it when it comes to company functions and things like that?" "I just tell everyone that he's either on the road or something else came up. I've done it so many times they don't even ask me anymore." "Well, you had me going, that's for sure." We had a wonderful dinner, and by the end of the night, I'd given her the highlights of my last 2 years. "I can't believe they would do that to you. That really sucks." "You're telling me?" "Well, it's now in the past, and I'm moving on with my life or whatever is left of it." I was, in fact, trying to mellow a little and rebuild my life, but revenge was still high on my list. "Hell, Steve, you're still young, and there are 100 women out there who would love a guy like you," she smiled, blushing a little too. "You're probably right, but I haven't had either the time or ambition to get back into the dating pool. I'm still a little leery." "Well, you asked me out, didn't you?" "You and your husband," I interjected. "Well, if I hadn't been married, would you still have asked me out?" "You know, I probably would have. You're easy to talk to and be around, but most of all, you're not a pathetic twit like my ex." "I'm going to take that as a compliment, I think," she said, laughing. The rest of the dinner went great. I left the next day and wouldn't be back for almost a month. I told her to give me a call every week, especially if anything cropped up. I started feeling more at ease around women, even those not in my inner circle. We went out most nights when I visited, which turned out to be every couple of weeks. I still had more than a few trust issues, but was working on them. Phone calls and emails allowed us to stay in touch. After a couple of months, we'd started kissing and doing a few other things. I was finally ready to take it to the next level. Was I becoming normal again? When Monica said she had a conflict Wednesday night, I thought nothing of it. We'd been going at it hot and heavy on Tuesday night, and I had forgotten to get a pack of condoms. "Steve, let's plan for a whole evening on Thursday," she said, giving me a full lip kiss at the door. Thursday, I was going to remember to pack the protection. Wednesday, I took out the city map and looked for a restaurant I hadn't been to yet. After 6 trips, I'd eaten at all the local places, so tonight I went on a research mission, as I like to call it. I found a nice Indian restaurant about 25 minutes from where I was staying. I sat down in a corner booth, ordered a beer, the full sampler platter, and was ready to kick back and relax. I didn't see them walk in, but heard a familiar laugh just after I got my meal. I switched sides in my booth and wished I hadn't. There was Monica and some guy at a table no more than 20 feet away from me, and by the looks of it, this wasn't a first date. They talked, laughed, held hands, and never lost eye contact. After 5 minutes of watching their lip action, I lost my appetite. I finished my beer, paid my check, and was out of there. She didn't look that conflicted, I thought to myself. I stayed away from her as much as possible on Thursday. Instead of eating in, I went alone to McDonald's for lunch. By 3 o'clock, Monica was starting to become my shadow. She smiled and flirted, even caressing my lower arm when we were close enough to touch. "You take care of your conflict last night?" I asked. "Yes, I did, and tonight you're all mine. I was thinking I know a quiet and intimate restaurant you might like. I found it last night, and the sampler platter is fabulous." I was looking right into her eyes. "What type of food is it?" "Indian food." Her face lost all of its color. "I was there last night, and can you believe it? In a restaurant all the way on the other side of town, I saw someone I knew." "What are the chances of that, Monica?" I never blinked. "Steve, I can explain." "No need. I probably should have realized what type of girl you were that first night in the restaurant. I got rid of one lying witch, and I sure as hell don't need another." I walked away, cutting my trip short that month. After not answering for emails, I never got another one. Trust issues still seemed to plague me. I thought I'd finally started to get over them, but Monica had brought them back with a vengeance. They assigned me someone else on my next trip, thankfully, a guy. 3 months later, I got an early Christmas present. The parking lot for Bob's office was located across the street from his building. There was a 4-way stoplight at the corner with a crosswalk and signal. It was a Friday night around 10 after 5. Bob was in a hurry to get home, and as soon as the crosswalk light lit up, he started to cross the street. He never noticed the car that was running the light to his left. It happened so fast the people nearest Bob didn't have time to warn him. The black sedan's right front side struck him, and he went sailing over the hood and smacked into the street. Neither of the 2 women that witnessed the hit-and-run got a good look at the car, much less a license plate number. All they said was it was a black 4-door car with tinted windows, which just happened to match my black BMW. The police car pulled into my driveway on Saturday night while I was having a conversation with my neighbor next door. The 2 cops exited their vehicle and approached us where we were conversing. The shorter of the 2 spoke up and said, "Mr. Moore, we would like to speak with you." Telling my neighbor, "Sure, no problem. Tom, I'll get back with you later on about the party." Tom watched us as he walked slowly back to his house. The other policeman read from his notepad and asked, "Mr. Moore, you own a 2002 320i black BMW?" I said, "That's right," unsure of what was going on. I joked, but they didn't laugh. "What's the matter? Did I forget to pay a parking ticket or something? Is the car here?" "Yes, it's in the garage." "What's this all about?" I inquired. "Sir, we'd like to see the car right now, please." My 2002 was not brand new, and although it was fixed the night I collided with Bob's vehicle, it still had a fair share of dings and scrapes. Still, it functioned flawlessly and was paid for. As I entered the house and turned on the garage door opener, one of the officers returned to his car to grab a camera. They moved to the car's front right side and began taking photos there. "Can you tell me how you got these scratches and marks on the bumper?" "Not a clue. If you really want to know, I bought this car new, and after 8 years, there are bound to be a few nicks and scratches. Now that I've answered all your questions, maybe you can answer one of mine. What's going on, and what does this have to do with my car?" "Mr. Moore, there was a hit-and-run accident yesterday afternoon, and the witnesses said it was a black sedan with dark windows, which matches the description of your car, and a million others in this town," I responded with a bit of annoyance. "Why me? Did my license plate match the vehicle, or did anyone identify me as the driver?" The two witnesses only saw the car. "Well, as you can see, there isn't any significant damage to the front end, and I can account for my whereabouts from about 8 a.m. until 6 o'clock yesterday." "Why pick on me?" "It's your history with the individual and your threats that prompted this visit. We will be on our way now. We appreciate your cooperation." As soon as they turned to head back down the driveway to their car, I yelled at them, "Wait a minute. Who was I supposed to have run over anyway?" "A Mr. Robert Kelly." I broke into a smile. "Is he dead?" "No, sir, but in critical condition." After a brief pause, they resumed their stroll towards their car. I gave them a wave, went inside, and uncorked a bottle of wine. I devoured nearly my entire pizza that I ordered. Still, I was able to finish the bottle of wine. The neighborhood was a hive of Bob rumors in celebration. Someone said, "The guy just can't seem to get a break," and someone else said, "He got what he deserved." Me? I felt as though I was in seventh heaven. Bob's health deteriorated and he died 2 days later. I looked nice. My outfit included a new suit, a haircut, and well-polished shoes. On the way there, I even made a stop to have my car waxed and cleaned. When I got there, the funeral home was not packed, but there were a lot of people lingering outside. Everyone who had been speaking abruptly stopped and watched me approach and enter. I strolled down the main aisle quickly without signing the book. Kathy raised her head and saw me. Observing the look of shock on her face at my presence, I smiled to myself. Sitting next to her, my 2 kids grinned at me. Before I reached the open casket, it took Kathy a mere 15 seconds to stand up and attempt to intervene. She was unsuccessful. Another snicker to myself. I had been taking it from my gut from the moment I began my walk down the aisle, and by the time I reached the open casket, I had more than enough in my mouth. I spit in Bob's face as I glanced down at him, who was resting comfortably in the coffin. I spilt so much that it ran down his face and onto his white shirt. Kathy cried and called me all the names in the book as she yelled at me. I had a smile on my face this time. I told her, 2 down, 1 to go. That brought her to a complete stop. She was still crying, but her eyes were now filled with fear. I quietly said, "I warned you," and left the now quiet funeral home. Over the following month, I was questioned by the police twice more. Kathy insisted that I was still involved even though it wasn't my car. The driver eluded capture, and the story was forgotten after several months. I had anticipated the police car pulling into my driveway. I wasn't even shocked to hear that they were taking me to the police station. Once again, I locked up my house and watched as my neighbors watched me get thrown into the back seat of a patrol car. With his picture slid in front of me, one of the 2 detectives said, "Mr. Moore, do you know David Kint?" "Yes, please," I answered. "How do you come to know Mr. Kint?" "I hired him to watch my ex-wife," I stated in a serious tone. "He's been watching her on and off for about a month." "Why did you hire Mr. Kint to watch your former wife, detectives?" "My ex-wife seems to have a black cloud hanging over her head since she took up with her now-late husband. Because my children are living with her, I felt it was my duty to make sure nothing happens to them. So I hired David to watch them, mostly at night, to make sure my kids were safe." "Well, your ex-wife notified us that she thought she was being followed and watched. She saw your Mr. Kint on more than one occasion and called us. When we picked him up yesterday, imagine our surprise when we found out you hired him," the officer replied in a sarcastic tone. "Mr. Moore, this comes very close to harassment, and you still might be charged if it continues. I'm just looking out for my children's safety, that's all. I couldn't care less if something unfortunate happens to my ex, but my 2 kids are a different matter. If this is a problem, then I'll rely on your department to make sure my children remain safe. Mr. Moore, it's not against the law what you're doing, but it is stretching the limits." why don't you just talk to your ex and try to work something out? Last time I tried that, I went to jail. They let me go, but for the third time, they said they were going to keep an eye on me. They really did need to come up with a better line. I didn't pay David to be inconspicuous. I wanted him to be seen by Kathy. The next guy I hired was even less inconspicuous and looked a whole lot meaner, like someone out of a Hell's Angels movie. He cost me $30 an hour and only worked 3 hours every fourth night, but I got the effect I wanted. You see, I wanted to try and drive my ex over the edge. I figured if she has a nervous breakdown, I'd get the kids full time. We were a family, the kids and I, but I wanted what had been taken from me. Steve, what the hell do you want? Kathy cried into the phone, clearly upset. She must have been shocked beyond belief when he said, I want you to choke on your spit and die. That's what I want, Kathy, because she immediately hung up. I stood by my porch, waiting. I told the 2 police officers as they approached my door, you guys are late. Kathy was charging me with threatening her life, but this time I'd already contacted my lawyer. He was waiting at the station for us when we arrived. My client did not threaten his ex-wife, my attorney told the police. He merely said that he'd like to see her dead, not that he was going to do it. Well, she took it as a threat on her life and was concerned because she's still being followed by people hired by your client. Look, it's not illegal to have someone watched, and unless you have a recording of Mr. Moore saying he was going to have Mrs. Kelly killed, you don't have a case, and you know it. Mr. Moore, why don't you just move on? So she left you for someone else. It happens every day. It's a shame you had to go to jail, but I understand those charges are already off your record. You're driving her nuts, and if she snaps and someone gets hurt, we're going to come looking for you, he said without a smile. Is there any way we can end this? I talked to my lawyer. All my client wants is his children back home with him. If Mrs. Kelly will give up custody, he'll back off 100%. We have nothing to say about that. That's for the court to decide. We said, well, you asked, and we told you. So, my client and I will be leaving, if there is nothing else, and we carried out our plan. The next Sunday morning, I was sitting on the deck enjoying breakfast and perusing the newspaper when I heard the front doorbell. Who would be up this early calling on me? I had no idea. When I opened the door, Kathy's parents were standing there. Steve, do you have a minute to talk to us? I greeted the 2 of them and said, sure, come on in. They looked their best for Sunday. I assumed they were either en route to or returning from church. Can I get either one of you a cup of coffee? Nothing for us, thank you. Well, what brings you around here? I inquired. Kathy's father started right in. Steve, I'll get right to the point. I know what our daughter did to you wasn't right, especially with you having to go to jail and all. But she is our only child, and we don't want anything to happen to her, if you know what I mean. Look, I am not out to put her in the grave, no matter what she thinks. She has made some bad choices, and now she's paying for them. All I want are my children back. They're better off with me, especially since she's having a run of bad luck. I'd hate like hell to have something happen to them if something unfortunate befalls her, if you get my drift. They just stared at me, not knowing what to say at this point. Steve, we'll talk to her, but you know how she is, Kathy's mother said, trying to overcome the discomfort they felt over my last statement. That's where you're wrong. The woman I married way back would never have cheated on her husband or thrown him to the sharks. I don't recognize who she is now, other than being the mother of my children. I'd like to see her die a horrible and painful death. You see, I don't forgive, and I sure as hell don't forget. With that said, they made a hasty retreat. I think I got my point across. She must have walked because I didn't hear a car pull up. She rang the bell, and I looked through the peephole and let her in. She was already furious when she walked through the door. I had half expected a phone call, but this was much better, her being here in person. That was Thursday evening, the day I'd been looking forward to for months. It was just after 7 and beginning to get dark. Kathy, please enter. Would you like something to drink? Humidity? On the rocks, hemlock? As I closed the door behind her, I spoke. Really humorous. You realize how much of an asshole you really are? I believe we're almost done, I said, opening the door for her again. It was nice of you to drop by. Why not lead a brief, miserable life? She looked at me as I continued to hold the door open and said. I won't be leaving until we resolve this, she said as she carefully took a seat in a living room chair. I said, suit yourself, before shutting the door and going to get a glass of wine in the kitchen. Now, what brings you to my humble abode? Recall our modest residence? Reminding her, I still own 50% of this house, less what I've paid on it since the divorce. Well, I'd like to sell this place. How much will it take for you to lower the price? A divine act? Would you be willing to pay interest on top of the loss we will incur? All done. Bring it on, she spat back at me. I just want you out of this neighborhood and away from me. That is not going to occur, Kathy, my dear. Do you still find me so offensive? More than you could ever know? Though it was embarrassing how it all transpired, my intention was never to become intimate with Bob. It simply took place. Kathy, she couldn't have believed me to be so foolish or innocent. If he didn't put a gun to your head, nothing would happen. You voluntarily went. Was he really that much better in bed that you ended up ruining our family and marriage? It wasn't about the sex, but my anger was coming out once more. More than anything, he needed me. He was alone, so I suppose we just clicked because we found ourselves in need of each other. Were you drilling social work, or what? You were necessary to me. You were needed by our children. You were essential to our marriage. You're saying, though, that your wet puppy needed you more? He's 6 feet underground now, and a whole lot less dependent. I grinned, relishing every nuance of that recollection. All I could wish for was to be behind the wheel of the vehicle that put an end to his wretched life. Steve, you've turned into a really nasty person, haven't you? It is truly sick to take pleasure in the misfortune of another person. I'd like to say I was self-made, but you and the dead guy had a hell of a lot to do with it, my dear. You're aware that's a cop-out. Do you really think that every spouse in the 60% of marriages that fail today hates their spouse? Aside from my own marriage, I couldn't care less about anyone else's. How long was I the foolish, credulous spouse? Does it concern me? Yes, it does. For 2 months? 3? 5? Approximately 5 months, if that's relevant. That was the first time it had happened, and I nearly told you about it that evening. She said, I was so devastated, with such composure that it almost seemed staged. However, you didn't, and given that it kept happening, I suppose you weren't all that sad. You screwed him in our goddamn bed how many times? Never. I would never have hurt you in that way, she uttered angrily. I suppose it was acceptable to drill him all over the place, huh? You know how many of our friends witnessed what was going on, but they never had the courage to come clean with me. It just goes to show that there are some people you just can't trust. You unequivocally demonstrated your lack of reliability. So, what are our next steps? Our last link to each other is this house. What about the children? You cannot convince me to give them up, and I will not give them up. Kathy, I won't even attempt to persuade you, my thoughts were racing right now. Because of where you took me to drive, you were granted complete custody. Had I not become obsessed with Bob and his vehicle that day, my chances of obtaining them would have been split 50-50ths. Bob received exactly what he deserved, leaving the two of us. Steve, are you threatening me? She asked, her eyes widening slightly. Me, rob my children of their biological mother, with a sarcastic and venomous tone, I said, I would never do that. But I want you to know that I'll make sure the kids never forget you in the event of something untoward, like if you had a heart attack, were hit by lightning, or were in an accident. Additionally, I wouldn't wait too long to write down any final requests you may have. One can never predict when an event may occur. That line, which I hoped would have the same effect, had come from a movie in which the hitman had told his target to sort out his affairs. After a dozen happy years, Kathy declared, "I'm out of here," getting to her feet. She attempted to kiss me on the cheek, but I pushed her back with both hands, nearly toppling her. "In a way, I'm sorry it ended." The words, "Don't ever try and touch me again, you 304, caught her off guard. "I apologize, I was just thinking." "What did you think?" "That things were now fine between you and me." "You make my skin crawl," I said, breathing fire into my eyes. She blurted out, "Sorry," her eyes wide with fear. She said as she left the front door and began to drive down the driveway, "Don't be, because I'm not. By the way, you know that look you just gave me?" That same expression had been on Bob's face moments before the car hit him that evening. I watched Kathy bolt for her house before closing the door. Too bad I didn't have a camera so I could show you. It took less than 5 minutes, start to finish, including tossing the plastic Gatorade bottles into a neighbor's recycle bin. I had excused myself to go to the bathroom, made my way out the side door, and through the backyards to the back of Bob's house. No one even missed me. I would like to take credit for Bob's death, but I can't. It was Bob being in the wrong place at the right time, or just plain dumb luck. If he had looked both ways, as his mother probably told him to as a child. I'm sorry it wasn't me, but there was no way I would have done it. I've been locked up in jail once, and I never wanted to go back, especially to the joint up north. But no matter what I say, Kathy and her family still believe I was involved. As for Kathy, she was probably at home by now, locking the doors, thinking she was next on my hit list. Am I going to pursue her? No way. I'll just keep giving her hints and innuendos until I drive her crazy and the court returns my kids to me. I will, however, tell any prospective buyer about the neighborhood arsonist who hasn't been apprehended. You see, I like my current location, especially since my 2 kids are right next door. You never know, when they turn 13, they might just decide to move in with their old man. Well, I can hope. The one silver lining in all of this has been that I have met someone with whom I think I might have a future. Her name is Ellen, and she works for the State Department of Corrections. I had to follow up with her the first year after I was released to make sure I was readjusting, rehabilitating, and doing okay. Ellen is tough and takes no crap. Once we got past the formalities, we started talking and discovered that we might be dating. Since Ellen couldn't ethically date me until my year of probation was up, we were finally able to go on a real date. I told Ellen that I had serious trust issues, and she approached me and said that most prisoners lie to them in one way or another. So now we're both working toward moving forward and, along the way, working through our trust issues together while developing a deeper relationship. Ellen made me consider what I've been doing since that 304 of a wife walked out on me, and she made me realize that my actions were preventing me from living a real life or developing meaningful relationships, and she told me it was time to move on. With a smile that made the hair on the back of my neck stand straight up, she further persuaded me to trust her. If I messed up and got thrown back in jail, my ass would be hers to do with as she wished, and darling, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, she said. Furthermore, what do you know? She is credible to me. I genuinely do. And even though I consider myself tough, Ellen is one woman I would never cross, so she makes things interesting when we're together. But what's even better is that I know deep down she wouldn't let me down either. I believe that I am now at last prepared to move on with my life and let love into my heart. Please feel free to express your opinions in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.